So I am here with a man with the best Ted Cruz impersonation and possibly the best Bernie Sanders impersonation on the internet, Kyle Kulinski, host of Secular Talk Radio. Kyle, how's it going, man?
Thanks, Mike. Me. I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for being here. I'm very excited. Now, also, congrats on the new studio. It looks great, and I know you're filming in your new office right now, right?
Yes, sir. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. It's funny because we just before we came on here and we're talking, somebody said something to me on Twitter like, I tried to donate to your studio and it's not working, and I'm like, wait, what? So I go and I look at it. It was like 4 or 5 days or something like that since the last donation. It turns out, like with GoFundMe, if you do a fundraiser longer than a month, it like requires you to withdraw a little bit or something. So anyway, long story short, we're doing this fundraiser, and now randomly, like smack dab in the middle of it for like 4 or 5 days, nobody was able to donate.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I mean, look, man, I'm already fucking ecstatic because of how like above and beyond we've gone. Like in the first day, it raised a ridiculous amount of money, so I was floored by the support. But it really is just funny that like in the middle of this fundraiser, which I was like really excited about and pushing, it's just like, yeah, it just isn't gonna work like halfway through. But other than that, it's going great.
That sucks. And that is kind of like a good thing to know in the future if I ever do any GoFundMes, because I had no idea either. The same thing would happen to me. But no, that was great that, you raised so much that quickly. And I think it speaks to just how good of a job you've been doing, because I feel like more so than the overwhelming majority of political commentators, you kind of have your finger on the pulse, which is why I was excited to get your opinion, because like I know this might be beating a dead horse, but I kind of wanted to talk about Hillary Clinton and just how shitty of a campaign she ran, because I feel like if we don't address this and if Democrats really don't know how shitty of a campaign that she ran, then I feel like it's going to happen again and again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, what was your take overall? I know you kind of talk about this a little bit on your show, but can you just give me an overall? Is it the case that Hillary Clinton ran the worst campaign ever, in your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, I think the only evidence against that is maybe just that she won the popular vote. So, okay, but you still lost. Like you knew the rules of the game going into it, and you knew that like winning the popular vote isn't enough. You knew which states you had to pick off. You knew which states you had to hold. And like just the fact that she didn't campaign in Wisconsin, and the fact that she basically took the Rust Belt for granted and just decided like, oh, that was a Democratic firewall last time. They came out for Obama, so obviously they'll come out for me. It just shows the hubris and the entitlement of her campaign. And I mean, it really is. God, I would have taken our chances with Martin O'Malley over Hillary Clinton. And Martin O'Malley, like, I don't think he said a sincere thing in his life. I think when he asked his wife to marry her, she was like, "Are you acting or is this real?" Because he's just so fake and so plastic. He's like our side's Marco Rubio. But I would have taken him because he didn't have the tremendous amount of baggage that she had. I mean, the Clinton Foundation, like even here's the thing, even the scandals that aren't real, like Benghazi, like there's so much smoke there that any reasonable person is going to go, well, maybe there's a fire.
Right.
So it's like she had a track record of just scandal after scandal, and a lot of this stuff is true, some of it not true, and she's just the wrong candidate. She's a 1990s candidate running at a time when, I mean, the type of politician that really had the heart of this election was like a Donald Trump and a Bernie Sanders.
Right. And what's weird about Hillary Clinton is that she's still like, it's really weird when I hear her reasoning as to why she thinks she lost. She explains, it was James Comey, it was everyone else but me, it was sexism, it was Bernie Bros or whatnot. But one thing that she just can't acknowledge is she fucked over her own base. Not only was she politically damaged because she already lost. I mean, we made fun of Mitt Romney when he was trying to get back into the race potentially in 2016. But I mean, you lost in 2008. We rejected you once. You were damaged. And then you had to walk on eggshells already because of that. And you fucked over the base with hubris, and you still can't acknowledge it. Nobody can acknowledge it. And I feel like that's one of the most frustrating things ever to me.
Well, classic Democratic failure is always ignore your base. So the Republicans, if you notice, they never do that. There's always something there for the... I mean, look at Trump picking Mike Pence for VP. that is nothing but a giant olive branch to the base to say, okay, all you idiots who supported Ted Cruz, like, okay, now you can come on board with me. I know me and Ted went at it, but here, I'm picking like the most anti-gay governor in the country with a track record of being super far right-wing. And who did Hillary Clinton pick? Fucking Tim Kaine, who's basically Mike Pence light. I mean, this guy is pro-TPP. This guy is known, like, he's hailed as a moderate and a centrist. And obviously the campaign talk behind closed doors was, well, I mean, look, Hillary's a woman, so we don't want to go too far out there with with minorities, and so don't pick a black person, don't pick another woman, don't go Elizabeth Warren. I mean, come on, that'd be crazy. Go with a white male. Go with the world's most boring white male. Go with that behind Jeb Bush. Tim Kaine's the only guy behind Jeb Bush.
Right.
But yeah, so they went. So it was a giant middle finger to the base, and the thing is, all the signs were there. Like, your base already really, really doesn't like you. All the Bernie voters. I mean, we looked at her like, I mean, come on, you're basically a Republican. Like, what are you doing here? And well, with her statements of I'm a centrist, guilty of being a centrist and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So like, if she did, there's so many things she could have done to actually win this election. One of the main things was if you actually picked a progressive VP,
right?
Because it's like people like me. It's like I was looking for reasons to go. Okay, come on, give me something, Hillary, give me something. And we just got slapped in the face at every fucking turn. Speeches with neocons in the general election, picking Tim Kaine. I mean, what did she only adopt like 2 or 3 of Bernie's proposals? And it was so obvious, just like putting a Band-Aid over it and just saying, adding it in the platform basically. Like, oh yeah, I like his education plan. We're going to adapt a part of that. Anyway, moving on, and then, go on to say more right-wing stuff. So if she picked Elizabeth Warren, I think she would have had a better chance of winning the election. If she picked any progressive VP, she would have had a better chance of winning the election. I could think of like 800 things that she could have done that would have actually made a difference. Only on the issue, if she were to, in every speech, make an effort to talk about how she's against TPP now and make people believe it, if she did what Trump did on TPP, just go out there and just rail against it every speech, I think she could have won the election. Right. But, they underestimated Trump's populism, and they underestimated how much, 9% of Democrats voted for Trump. So it shows you it's not just this idea of he's racist, he's, and people who vote for him are deplorable, and that's the end of the conversation.
Right. And, when you say 9% of Democrats voted for Donald Trump, with that fact in mind, how in the hell are people blaming Jill Stein and Gary Johnson supporters? Jill Stein barely got 1% of the vote. Gary Johnson got in about 3% of the vote. But yet people flipped and supported Donald Trump. And this is what happened in 2000 as well. There were hundreds of thousands of Democratic voters, registered Democrats, that literally voted for George Bush, and still people blame Ralph Nader. It's like Democrats focus on all the wrong things. And to kind of go back to what you were saying about Hillary Clinton, she was disingenuous to the nth degree, and she made so many rookie mistakes that I was like pulling my hair out. I mean, some of this was common sense that she was missing. And one thing that you said kind of made me think a little bit about how when she was campaigning with Bernie Sanders, she had, I don't know if you saw the video of her, there was like this background that said free college education or whatever with Bernie Sanders, and it looked like Bernie Sanders was fucking being held hostage trying to, stump for Hillary Clinton. She only talked about that once she realized that a third of millennial voters were flipping and going to Gary Johnson and Jill Stein.
Exactly. So she saw, there was a poll that came out that had like alarming numbers of millennials. She lost some ridiculous percentage of millennials in like 1 month. And then she's like, oh my God, what do I do? And then they're like, I don't know, be Bernie Sanders. Like, take 1 or 2 of his policies and then go out there and say that. But remember the rest of her millennial outreach? It was just the most cringe-inducing bullshit I've ever seen.
I'm just chilling in Cedar Rapids.
And a lot of that, I think, is because back when Clinton won, Bill Clinton, like, he went on, like, Arsenio Hall's show and played the fucking saxophone. And, like, back then, that was viewed as, like, oh, he's a cool politician. Because back then, no politician ever tried to, like, give an olive branch to pop culture, if you will. Mm-hmm. So, but since Bill Clinton, every president has been, like, look at Obama. I mean, how many times has he been on fucking Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon and all these people? He was even on The Daily Show once, like, or a few times, actually. So, like, Hillary was going off that old model of like, I must be hip and with it, and I must do the Macarena and talk about Pokemon.
I don't know who to the polls.
And now we're at a time where that era's dead and gone. Again, she's acting like it's 1992, and that's how you're supposed to run a campaign. Meanwhile, what did Bernie Sanders show? What did Donald Trump show? The style of politician that's like super scripted and really robotic, we don't like that anymore. People don't like this, I'm classy and above the fray kind of approach anymore, because it smells really fake, because it is. Mm-hmm. So what they want is somebody like Bernie or somebody like Trump, who, even if they're not, like in the case of Trump, he's usually not keeping it real. He's a fucking chronic liar. But the way he talks, people go, oh, I think that guy's a straight shooter. It's kind of like with Chris Christie when he talks, oh, I guess he's a straight shooter because he fucking yells at people. Like, that's the thing, is you need that. With Bernie fucking not combing his hair and being a really old guy who talks with his hands up and he gets really into it, like, that's what people want. They want to look at you and go, okay, that's a real person. And honestly, I think a lot of that has to do with the evolution of the internet. How now, shows like ours, we get people who watch us, and it's just a whole new way of delivering information. It's not the bullshit, news anchor wearing a suit and tie and having the perfect posture and talking in that standard voice that people have in both Sacramento and Tallahassee with the same rhythm and cadence. So people are just sick of that, and they want to move away from it. And Hillary Clinton was like the last representative of that dying generation. But now we have to wait and see if the Democrats will make the mistake that it looks like they're going to make, which is try to put another person like that, to run in 2020.
Yeah, and from the looks of it, 2020 is looking a lot like 2008, because I don't know if you've been keeping up with who's kind of contacting donors. Kirsten Gillibrand, who is basically Hillary Clinton's mini-me, and then you have Cory Booker, who's Obama Jr. It seems like they're both gearing up. And something about Kirsten Gillibrand is really, it just annoys me. One, she looks like she enjoys the smell of her own farts. She just gives me that vibe. And two, I kind of feel like she really discredited herself even more. I mean, we all knew she was a Wall Street shill, but we don't have the details of it, but there's an article, I think, in Politico that talked about how she railed against Bernie Sanders when he returned to the Senate because he didn't drop out fast enough and endorse Hillary Clinton. Not
only that, so I think when she first ran, I think I voted for her when she was like running for the first time. But then, I noticed during the campaign, during the primary, she made one of the hackiest anti-Bernie Sanders arguments I've ever heard. She said something along the lines of, "Oh, he can't sympathize. He's unable to sympathize with, the mothers of people who were killed with gun violence."
Oh, right.
So, this was in the midst of Hillary using like shitty arguments against Bernie because Bernie only has like a D rating from the NRA and not an F. And they're like, oh, Bernie, you don't want to allow people to sue gun manufacturers unless there's negligence. So, it's like the car thing. Like if I used to be a car salesman. So it's like if I sold somebody a car and then, 6 years later, the person snaps and runs over people and kills them. Should that person be allowed to sue the car dealership and sue the car maker? It's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, how the fuck were they supposed to know? Yeah. So Bernie has the same position on guns. And they made it seem like he's fucking, he's Liam Neeson in Taken or some shit. Like he's going around shooting people. They're like, oh, Bernie, you don't sympathize with people. Meanwhile, Bernie, Hillary and him agree on the basics. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, do universal background checks, do high capacity magazine ban, yada yada. So it's like there were such hack arguments used against him. And it's so obvious that it was a concerted effort by the establishment to take down an actual liberal who wanted to do shit for the people and not for the corporations. That, I certainly had the experience in this election of just losing a lot of respect for a lot of people who I formerly thought, they're not that bad. No, right. To steal from Trump, wrong. I was wrong.
Sad.
Sad, pathetic. 50% of the people, in the Democratic Party, you look at them and you're like, oh, so when I thought you were reasonable, you were just like playing a role, like playing for a team. Mm-hmm. So like when you would say stuff about, yay, let's raise the minimum wage and do this stuff, you're only saying that because you're on a team as opposed to, people who were fans of Bernie Sanders. You get the sense they wanted that because they're like, no, this is how you help people and fucking make like the world a better place as opposed to hack, Hillary Clinton fans who are just kind of accidentally on the half correct team.
Right, and you could tell that, they didn't really look into the details. They were playing Team Democrat, kind of as you were saying, because it's inconvenient to kind of really dive into the facts. It's difficult to figure out what a candidate is really about. So you have people like, that was a great point, by the way, about you just losing respect for people. I mean, I can name so many people that I can't fucking stand. Like, now, Sarah Silverman. I used to like her prior to this election. I can't stand her now. Bill Maher, I mean, I still like him, but he lost so much credibility in my eyes. And then even Louis C.K., who he literally said that not only is he voting for Hillary Clinton, but she's like the best. She's his first choice.
Yeah, I take her over anybody. That's what he said. I take her over anybody. Look, and I don't know to what extent, like the Louis C.K. thing that he said out Conan, I covered that too, and it was like, I don't know to what extent he's joking and to what extent he's serious, but yeah, like when you hear people say shit like that, you just, like Amy Schumer was probably the worst offender.
Oh,
I mean, Sarah Silverman is still like fantastic compared to Amy Schumer.
Right,
Amy
that's
Schumer,
true.
with her arguments, I mean, it was just facepalm after facepalm. Like she, what did she say? Something like,
you're uninformed if you don't like Hillary. That's
exactly. Yeah, you're uninformed if you don't like Hillary Clinton. Like, I did a long segment like, what? Let me give you all real reasons why it's perfectly rational to dislike Hillary Clinton. So I don't know, that kind of smug. Well, this was like the Hollywood establishment lining up alongside Hillary Clinton, along with the financial establishment. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that is just insufferable because it was so fake. And notice, they weren't able to come through for her. I mean, she had that fucking concert like the night of the election, the night before the election or some shit, right? It was like fucking Bruce Springsteen's there and Obama's giving a speech and there's a zillion people out in the open and it's like, it had this sense. They thought it had this sense of like inevitability and like the glorious victory that's coming tomorrow. But if you're outside of that establishment Democratic bubble, like we are, we just look at it and we go, oh, you're doing like a fucking insufferable, unbearable coronation of like your hand-picked oligarchy candidate, and we're sick of it. Yeah. Like it's the McFeminism thing. Yep. So for people who don't know what that is, I got that term from a guy named Adam Johnson who writes for Alternet and Fair, and he had gotten it from somebody else. But so I've been using it. McFeminism is this idea that like you use feminism as a shield to like, in Hillary's case, be just an establishment asshole. Like, you do corporatist policies and you're like a right-wing Democrat, but since you're a woman, you get to say, oh, you disagree with me? Well, I guess you're sexist. Just like what they did to Bernie Sanders supporters. So it's like, it's this, not only is there McFeminism, now there's also McLiberalism. Mm-hmm. The idea of like, oh, pop culture, they love Hillary Clinton, and so therefore, if you're not with her, you're a bad person or you're not liberal. It's like, well, no, actually, you guys are the ones who aren't liberal because if you supported her over a candidate who, really cared about the issues and has a decades-long track record of fighting for them, as opposed to Hillary when you did get into her record, I mean, it's fucking support for NAFTA, voting for the Patriot Act, voting for the Iraq War. So it's the exact opposite. Like, they would say to us, oh, you're not the real liberals. No, but if you go by the issues, you're not the real liberals. You're just hopping on board this feeling of inevitability with this corporatist shitty candidate who has a D by her name, so you feel like it's got to be the right one.
Right. I mean, if you compare Hillary Clinton to, like, Theresa May, for example, in the UK, like, there's not much difference there. And she's in the Conservative Party. So, I mean, we're the ones who are the true liberals because we're actually looking at the policy substance and we're not just, like you said, looking at the D. And it's so frustrating. And they really, I mean, I feel like Hillary Clinton supporters in many ways, not to, talk shit about the base, but they were worse than Donald Trump supporters because they not only failed to see what happened during the primaries with Bernie Sanders and whatnot and said we were conspiratorial, which is funny now because, now they're looking at the integrity of the election too. But, they won and then they kind of like threw it in our face. And I kind of feel like the Democratic establishment did that too. And Hillary Clinton did that as well. So, I mean, this election really, it is all about hubris. And one person, kind of on the subject of people who fell out of favor with us, I wanted to get your take on Elizabeth Warren because I'm lukewarm on her now. I mean, before the election, I loved her. And I'd still probably vote for her in 2020. But I mean, she gave this speech about how Democrats need to grow a spine now that the election is over. Meanwhile, she's been completely silent on the Dakota Access Pipeline. It's like, Elizabeth, you're saying the right words, but you have to actually walk the walk. And what are your thoughts on Elizabeth Warren? Because I feel like maybe I'm just a little bit overly butthurt still about not endorsing Bernie, but I don't know, man.
So, if you were to ask me this before this election, I had Elizabeth Warren in the exact same category that I had Bernie Sanders, where, both super progressive, always do the right thing. So she was in the A+ category for me. After this election, she's no Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, it is what it is. She's not Bernie Sanders. I know. By the way, a lot of people would even disagree with me on this, and they'd say, "Well, Bernie eventually endorsed Hillary, so Bernie Sanders is no Bernie Sanders." No, on that I disagree. I think he really just made a sheer lesser of two evils calculation. I don't view him as some sort of sellout. People who wanted him to run with Jill Stein, I don't think they get that the math would simply make it so Donald Trump is guaranteed to win if they did that. And he just didn't want Donald Trump to be president for understandable reasons. So I don't think she's Bernie Sanders anymore. She's just as good as you can get of an establishment Democrat. So she's like the better wing of the establishment Democrats. And it's kind of, there's, you know what it is, man? It's just, there's so many shades of gray and it's this giant spectrum. So if Hillary Clinton is like one of the worst Democrats, and actually that's not even fair because there are blue dog Democrats that are worse than her. Like Evan Bayh is worse than Hillary Clinton. Who else? Joe Manchin, I think, is
he's terrible.
Yeah, so there's all these gradations of Democrats. And if Joe Manchin and Evan Bayh are the worst, then one step slightly better than them is Hillary Clinton. And then I have Obama somewhere between Hillary Clinton and like Elizabeth Warren. And then Bernie Sanders and Alan Grayson, they would be more on the end of the spectrum of even better than Elizabeth Warren. So overall, she's still done so many great things. Nobody could ever take away from her the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Right.
The fact that she fought tooth and nail to get the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau passed. She basically forced Obama to get it passed. And so you can't take that away from her, and you can't take away the actual progressive things that she did. And I still think, broadly speaking, she's on the right side of most issues. But obviously it just sucks, and it's really concerning, and it's really annoying that, number one, she didn't endorse Bernie. And number two, she's silent on some important issues like the Dakota Access Pipeline. So, but I guess the overall point I'm trying to make is there's so many shades of gray that I don't think it's fair to just categorize as like sellout or not sellout. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think it's
there's
like
nuance.
There's a shitload of nuance among the Democrats, and they range from just as bad as the Republicans to like Evan Bayh and fucking Joe Manchin to almost as bad, maybe like 0.8% better Hillary Clinton, and then the Obama types, and then Elizabeth Warren, and then Bernie. So there's a huge spectrum. My feelings are similar to yours. I've kind of mixed on her after the whole Bernie episode, and you just kind of hope that the reason she did what she did was some sort of strategy, because I think my guess would be in her heart of hearts she did support Bernie over Hillary, which is why she was the only female in the Senate, or I think it might have even been the only female Democrat in all of Congress who didn't endorse Hillary Clinton during the primary. So like she held back there because I think that's a sign of like, I really want Bernie to win. Then waited until she basically thought it's totally over now, and then endorsed Hillary Clinton. So you'd hope she's like making that her true feelings are pro Bernie, and she made sort of a calculation there so that she could maybe have some sway over the Hillary Clinton administration if Hillary were to win. I mean, that's the best case scenario, and that's what you hope. That's what I lean to think maybe she did. But either way, it's a mixed picture, and she's no longer an A+ Democrat. She's more of a B+ Democrat.
Right. And, she's one of many, I think, that I used to love unequivocally, and now it's like,
yeah. Now it's like,
tough.
Okay, now I got to now I got to watch everything that you do. But you know what? It's even we're being a little too kind, even, because I remember even when I had her in like the category with the best Democrats, she said some shit about when Israel was bombing the living fuck out of Gaza in 2014 and just massacring civilians left and right. She had some horrific statement that was just like a Republican. He was like, Israel has a right to defend itself, and that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah, Bernie said that too, actually, in 2014.
Bernie did too. Exactly. So even
Yeah.
that's the thing, is even among these, like, there's none of them are, you're never going to agree with them 100%.
Right.
And there are going to be some areas where you just scratch your head and you're like, what the fuck did you just say? And this is normally somebody who you're like, oh, yay, I agree with them and I'll support them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's politics, man, and it sucks.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when you talk about Joe Manchin, I don't remember what he said about punching. He said something about punching people in the face who burned the flag after Trump said that statement. But that made me think of Trump. And I wanted to, you kind of alluded to this, but do you think that Donald Trump was kind of baiting the press by talking about flag burning? Because what he proposed was similar to what Hillary Clinton proposed. So I don't know if he's just kind of messing with people and saying, well, let's see if they take the bait. I think he believes it, but
I think it's a coincidence that Hillary Clinton proposed legislation to basically ban flag burning in 2005. And it's funny because, again, like you see, like, what's her face? Neera Tanden said something on Twitter that was like, oh, right. And they like took Donald Trump's tweet and then tweeted above it, like, oh, right. And Hillary Clinton and him are the same. Right.
Oh, my God.
It's like, you fucking idiot. Oh. Do you know nothing about Hillary when you worked for her since 1723? Like, she proposed legislation to ban it. So, no, I don't think that was his goal. I don't think he's playing chess and he's that smart and he's like, ooh, I'm going to bait liberals into hypocrisy. I just think he's an impulsive guy. And there was a story recently about how on a college campus, some liberals like took down the flag and then burned the flag after he won. And so this was him like kind of lashing out at that and saying, oh, there should be punishment for this. But, you know, the stuff like that, you get the sense that Hillary, she was doing that sheerly for like political reasons back then. You know what I mean? In 2005. Because I don't know, I guess there was some story that involved that. And she was like, I'm going to be bipartisan now and go on the side of the Republicans. But, like, you don't get the sense that if she were president today, she would be saying, let's punish people for burning the American flag. But, yeah, no, I am scared of his authoritarian impulse. I am. Because he's, he's demonstrated it time and time again that he's willing to actually take the steps once he has those, like, childish emotions of retribution. Like with the whole suing The Onion and suing Bill Maher over jokes.
Right.
It's like, you're a fucking man-child. How can you do that? Now he's president.
Yeah, he's the most triggered president in U.S. history. And I think you make a phenomenal point. You're really the first person who I heard make this argument, besides TJ, the amazing atheist, about right-wing SJWs.
Yes.
Like, they rail against political correctness, but they're just as easily triggered. I mean, all the people who talk about people getting offended if you say something that's too politically incorrect, they're the same people who would lose their shit if you make fun of Jesus. The same people. And it's just so frustrating, the hypocrisy and whatnot. So I think that's something that... let me ask you this. Do you think that the right will kind of, at least his base anyways, kind of lose favor with Donald Trump when it comes to... Because he's already kind of gone back on some of his promises. How long do you think, if it is going to happen, that they'll actually realize, oh shit, we were conned?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think that the same thing is going to happen that happened with Ronald Reagan, and the same thing is going to happen that happened with George W. Bush, which is for many conservatives, I should say, they really are at their core, there's a streak of authoritarianism. So, and it's not just in the U.S., it's the world over. So when they pick a leader, they now view it as, and this happens on the left too, but I think to a slightly lesser degree, but they view it as like, okay, now we have to play defense for our guy who's in there. So no matter what he does, I mean, there's like Ann Coulter, just to give one example, I saw her earlier today tweeting about like trade deals, and now all of a sudden Ann Coulter is, massively protectionist and against trade deals. Meanwhile, under George W. Bush, when he was pushing for them, she was the most in favor of them you could possibly be. Hannity, the same thing. Like, Hannity was during the Bush years, if Bush pushes for them, oh, I love trade deals, they're great. If you're against them, you're un-American. Now that Donald Trump is, at least in rhetoric, against them, all of a sudden he's like, oh, me? I fucking never liked trade deals. I don't know what you guys are talking about. He did it with the NSA, too. The NSA under Bush spying on everybody. He says, oh, you're unpatriotic if you're against this, and this is to protect the homeland. And then, obviously, under Obama, he doesn't dismantle it. He puts it on steroids. And then all of a sudden now, the same programs, he's like, oh, this is an unconstitutional overreach. So I think that whatever Trump does, they're going to go, okay, you know what? it is what it is. He's our leader, and now let's defend it. Even to the point where, I don't know if you remember, but right after the election, he did an interview, I think, with 60 Minutes. And in it, he said something along the lines of, look, the Supreme Court ruled on gay marriage. I'm fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, evangelicals voted for him in gigantic numbers. Even in the primaries,
right, that's weird.
Beat Cruz with evangelicals. And Cruz wakes up in the morning and beats off to Jesus. So this is, I mean, me, I'm Ted Cruz, me. So, yeah, he could say anything, and then his people will defend. Mm-hmm. So now we're on Team Republican. He's the leader of the Republicans. Now we're going to defend. So right. And look, there are some accidental upsides to that. So if he does happen to do more protectionist policies and kill the TPP, mm-hmm. okay, great. Hey, I'm happy you killed the TPP, and sure. If you want your cackling, idiot, brainless followers to all of a sudden jump on the anti-TPP bandwagon, fine. It makes my fight against it easier because, I don't have to convince them. They're on our side now, so I have to just convince the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats that it's wrong. So there's some unintended upsides of that, but overall, yeah, I think they're just going to defend him.
Right. And to be fair to Trump's people, I saw a lot of this on the left, too, with Hillary Clinton. Like, you had Hillary Clinton people defending the Iraq war. Like, I don't know who it was. It was one of the hosts of The View, and Jimmy Dore talked about this, how she was talking to someone, maybe it was Bernie Sanders himself, about the Iraq war, and she was one of the most outspoken people in 2008 against McCain and whatnot for supporting it. And she was like, well, isn't it done? Should we give her a pass for it now? I mean, isn't that... spoiled milk.
Yeah, that's it's probably just... Joy Behar, or maybe Whoopi said that. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, but
I think you're right.
It's yeah, I hate that. I fucking despise it, and mm-hmm. Yeah, that does happen on the left too, for sure. Definitely with those Hillary people, because like we were talking about earlier, they kind of expose themselves as not really caring too much about the issues, and just kind of having a personality cult. But I noticed that during the election too, when it came to the. Ironically, people screamed at Bernie supporters saying, we are in a personality cult. What?
Yeah.
First of all, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have been on all sides of all issues. You could find them saying anything about any fucking policy ever, any issue. Bernie's been saying the same thing for decades. Mm-hmm. So it's quite the opposite. Bernie supporters, while they fervently love Bernie, of course, they do it because he actually stands for something coherent and consistent, and mm-hmm. something that would help the American people and make our country a thriving social democracy. Whereas, think about it, if you are a big-time supporter of Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, you literally cannot be doing it based off of policy. Because I just mm-hmm. told you, they've been on every side of every policy issue. So what are you doing it based off of? It's got to be something else. It's got to be, I don't know, I like the way they talk, I like the way they act, I don't know, they just represent something. Right, that she's a woman.
Establishment.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite the opposite. I found that their supporters were very cultish. And remember, only 9% of the American people chose them in the primaries. 9%. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's abysmally low.
Right.
And that's an argument right there. I'm not a big fan of mandatory anything, but when I read those numbers, I thought, you know what, maybe we do go the same route that a lot of other modern nations have it, mandatory voting.
Australia does.
Exactly. Just like we have, like jury duty. Like, oh, you got to go to jury duty.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would voting not be one of those things?
Right. No, I'm with you on that, actually. This was really the first election where I really started to consider, maybe I am in favor of compulsory voting after all. Because, what else can we do at this point? When you have turnout so low, that's just bad for democracy, generally speaking. Of course. Totally. Because, you're a political science guy. You know that when people check out, that's bad news. But I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one last thing I wanted to get your opinion on was, and there's really no right or wrong question because we don't have, or answer because we don't have all the information. Do you think that Donald Trump can actually be perceived as a successful president? Because he has Congress on his side, and this is what I fear. I fear that if he's able to be efficient and actually pass a lot of policies, if we're anticipating that Democrats will just roll over and die, do you think that the American people will kind of look at him as just doing things and think, well, Congress wasn't functioning and now things are getting done. I don't know if they're good or bad, but they're getting done. Do you think that can help him and kind of make him look as though he's a Ronald Reagan type figure?
If you held a gun to my head today and said, Kyle, you need to tell me right now, will Donald Trump get reelected or not? Now, obviously, I'm doing this right after he got elected the first time, so it's super limited information. There's a million and one things that are going to happen in the next 4 years.
Right.
So this is as, as uneducated a guess as you can get, because the limited information we have now is going to be obsolete in a little bit, right?
Totally.
But if you held a gun to my head today and said, is he more likely to get re-election or not? I would say he's more likely to win re-election. Because the Democratic Party is in shambles, and he's going to do what he did that I covered today and he did this week, which is like the carrier deal, how he cut a deal, and the details of the deal are not good, to be clear, because it's like corporate welfare and all that shit and deregulation. But he cut a deal, and he said, okay, carrier, you're keeping at least some of your jobs in this country, and they're not going to Mexico. And then he did a press conference where he fucking bragged endlessly. And that is brilliant politics. And it's something that the Democrats never do. When Obama increased the overtime, the amount of people that get overtime, he didn't brag about it. When he got the Cuba deal, and then Cuba subsequently legalized small businesses, he didn't brag about it. When he got the Iran deal and cut off Iran's path to a nuke, he didn't brag about it. The list goes on and on. When he covered millions more people with Obamacare, and everybody knows Obamacare is not my favorite, we need single payer. That's obviously what we need. But you could have went out there and said, hey, guess what? I saved lives because now if you have a pre-existing condition, they have to cover you. He could have bragged. He didn't do it. So when you don't do it, well, then you let the opposition define you and frame you and also lie about you. They could just lie and say shit that's not true, but since they're the ones who have the bully pulpit, with Obamacare, that's another great example. The Republicans made the argument, people forget about this, there are death panels and they want to kill your grandma. Now, me and you look at that and we go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But what happens is a lot of people in the country, they listen to that, and their response isn't, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Their response is, oh my goodness, that is such a strong claim, and these people are so against Obamacare that something's got to be wrong with it. Because I don't even hear the counter-argument from the Democrats saying, no, that's not true, and we just saved X amount of lives. So the Republicans are good at framing. The Republicans are good at arguing, and Donald Trump, any little victory he notches, and he will notch a bunch of little victories that he can spin as positive to the American people. He's going to go out there, he's going to brag, and he's going to use that bully pulpit more effectively than any other president. So my guess is that mixed with the fact that the Democratic Party is in shambles, as of right now, it's more likely he gets reelected. But obviously I got to bite my tongue because there's so much more that goes into it. We could have a giant economic crash. In fact, I think one is coming. I just don't know when it's coming. And he can handle that in a disastrous way. And, there's just a lot of things that can happen. But I don't know. Even with Trump, I'm just hoping against all reason that he somehow stands up against the worst picks that he made, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who says good people don't smoke marijuana, he's openly racist, Mike Pompeo for the CIA, who wants to fucking execute Edward Snowden. He said things that are more populist and more liberal than these jackasses he's picking. You just got to hope that the things he said that are good are going to be the things that he actually sticks to. But, with Donald Trump, you just never fucking know. And there's already been signs that are in the opposite direction. But before I go real quick, I wanted to ask you about what did you think about the argument that, hey, maybe Donald Trump winning is actually better for the left as opposed to Hillary Clinton winning?
I don't agree with it. And I say that because typically what you see with voters is when they lose or if something doesn't go their way, they tend to get demoralized. And you saw a lot of people like really amped up. I know I was fired up after Donald Trump won and whatnot, but typically it just is the case that, if Donald Trump of all people could win, I think the average voter is going to look at that and think, change is never possible. If he can win, then we're never going to get the policies that we want. But in terms of like uniting the left and whatnot, I feel as though that's not going to happen because you already see signs that the Democrats are going to roll over and die. I mean, Representative Elijah Cummings said that he's going to work with Trump where they have common ground. Now, you hear that, and at face value, it's reasonable, right? But what that really means, if history, it repeats itself, is that Democrats are going to give Republicans everything that they want. Like, I mean, in the 90s, Bill Clinton signed Republican welfare into law. He signed NAFTA into law. They gave George Bush everything. I think one of the few things that they fought against George Bush on was when he tried to partially privatize Social Security. So I feel like, maybe uniting the base in a way after 8 years, if Democrats can get their shit together, it'll be good, because we kind of seem to alternate every 8 years between a Republican and a Democrat, and we'll just be sick of, a Republican. Maybe then, but in terms of just like this real big force or something kind of akin to the Tea Party but on the left, I want it to happen, but, part of me thinks that it probably won't. So I don't know that I agree with that argument.
Yeah, well, we're going to try to bring that about, but to your broader point, I agree with it because I kind of agree with Noam Chomsky on this, and Noam Chomsky made the point that first of all, it's going to be a struggle to mobilize either way. Like, mobilizing is a fucking pain in the ass, and it's going to be hard to mobilize either way. But you would rather be mobilizing against somebody who at least partially, somewhat is receptive to what you're saying, as opposed to somebody who, on many fronts, is actively trying to go in the wrong direction and go way in the wrong direction. So, basically Chomsky said with Trump, you're going to be fighting to hold on to some basic things that you wouldn't have had to fight to hold on to otherwise. Like, for example, when he wants to have nationwide stop and frisk, which is massively discriminatory, and over 90% of the people that they stop, they get nothing, and it disproportionately cracks down on minority communities. You talk about something like that. You talk about what he wants to do with undocumented immigrants, how he would go much further than what even Obama did, and what Hillary Clinton wanted to do. So you're also sorry, I got to pivot back to the other point that you made, which is a point I've made on my show as well too, which is, the Democrats are going to roll over either way. The elected Democrats, they rolled over under Reagan, they rolled over under George W. Bush. If there was ever going to be a time when they were going to stand up and fight, it was going to be when you had George W. Bush, this massively unpopular president who did insane things. You could have stood up and voted against the Iraq war and said, there's no evidence, and we already invaded Afghanistan, so we're fighting Al-Qaeda, so you can't say we're weak on terror. There's no evidence, there's no evidence, there's no evidence. They didn't do that. They passed the Patriot Act. They rolled over for that. They rolled over for his tax cuts. The list goes on and on. So if they were ever going to fight, they were going to fight under George W. Bush, and the elected Democrats didn't do that. So to me, that's all the evidence I need that now we're just at the whims of Trump, because if Trump decides to go in a far-right direction in many respects, and I fear he will, well, then the Democrats are going to roll over. So, if you had somebody like Hillary, who's at best like Obama, at worst right of Obama, you still know that the worst you're going to get is just right of Obama. As opposed to with Donald Trump, there's this wild card angle where it's like, no, if he does like 1/10 of the really bad things he said during the campaign, like, bring back torture, take out their families, kill, civilians in the Middle East on purpose, lower wages. Oh, wages are too high. Eliminate the FDA and the EPA. He's already looking like he's going to appoint people who are just not going to fucking enforce it. He's going to Rick Perry for the Department of Energy. He's going to sit around with his thumb up his ass, and that's going to be the entire fucking point. So, you're just at the whims of Trump at that point. So, I kind of agreed more with Chomsky that the counterintuitive argument I never bought. Like, it's got to get as bad as humanly possible to get better. Well, then if that's your argument, then be consistent and just vote Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, I don't agree with that.
If you really believe that. So if you really believe Trump is better for the left, vote Trump.
And one thing... Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say is, one thing that I fear, and I hope that I'm wrong, I really hope I'm wrong, is that Democrats have displayed that they're so incompetent that if they see that Donald Trump was successful, and if maybe his approval rating starts to increase, I have a feeling they might even move to the right again, kind of like they did in the 1990s after Reagan.
Totally right. No, totally correct, because that's they never learned the right lesson. So if we saw, what was the reaction to Hillary's people when she lost? Oh, blame Comey, blame Jill Stein, blame Gary Johnson, blame sexism. So zero self-reflection. Well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to go back and they're going to look at what Hillary did in her campaign. And they're going to say, where did we deviate from the standard political textbook of like run to the right in the general election? So run to the left in the primary, run to the right in the general election. And they're going to say, they're going to pin it on the few things she did that were slightly more progressive than she would have done if Bernie wasn't in the race. And I've already seen articles about that.
Time magazine.
Yeah, her problem is that she followed Bernie to the left off a cliff. What the fuck are you talking about?
Ugh.
So they're going to take the exact wrong message. This is what happened in the midterms, too. Remember in the midterms, Allison Lundergan Grimes, who is basically a Republican who's a Democrat.
And Mitch, that's not how you hold a gun. I'm Allison Lundergan Grimes.
Ran against Mitch McConnell, Turtle Boy, who had an approval rating of negative 3,002. And she lost. And she lost because the American people went, okay, look, we might not like Mitch, but at least he's not like this weaselly character who's basically trying to say, I kind of agree with Mitch on everything, but I'm just a new face, so maybe vote for me. She was asked if she voted for Obama in a press conference. She wouldn't fucking answer. She's a Democrat. She wouldn't say, yeah, of course I fucking voted for him. She wouldn't say it. So it was this fundamental weakness. And the Democrats always learned the lesson of, the problem was she wasn't weak enough. She wasn't right-wing enough. She didn't agree with the Republicans enough. They never walk away going, oh, well, maybe the problem was we needed to go way further left. And they never look at the opinion polls and figure that out either. How even Vox did a poll in the primary, and they found that Bernie's agenda was super popular. Mm-hmm. Way more than if you fucking isolate what Ted Cruz believes or Hillary Clinton believes and do a poll. So he had so many people with him. Sorry, I'm getting all worked up here.
No, I love it. You're right, though. And it's so frustrating. And I covered a Time article, and which just reinforces this notion that we're talking about here. They called Bernie Sanders the Ralph Nader of 2016 because his presence was so devastating that he pushed Hillary Clinton so far to the left, even though she was courting neoconservatives, that she lost. She just wasn't electorally viable. Yep. And it just makes my fucking head explode. I can't deal with the stupidity.
Yeah, because it's like they're incapable of learning the proper lesson. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost like with the Republicans where they'll cut taxes and deregulate, and then the economy will crash, and then they'll go, oh, I know the problem. We didn't cut taxes and deregulate enough. We needed to do it more. It's like, no, the exact opposite. You needed to do stimulus, and you needed to regulate to make sure everything was okay. Right. So it's one of those things where in their mind, our position is their position is non-falsifiable. Mm-hmm. So no matter what, the answer is go further right, cave more to the Republicans. And that's just a recipe for total and utter disaster and repeated loss.
Right. Or blame voters, blame Bernie bros, and, blame people who didn't get out to vote, even though they weren't inspired by two historically disliked candidates. It's frustrating, and I feel like
there's a strategy for winning. Blame the voters. Yeah, good one.
Right, and that was what was weird is that even during the primary, you saw Bill Clinton attacking Bernie Sanders supporters, saying, "Well, they want to be so harsh on Wall Street. What do they want? Do they want to set up a firing squad or something of that nature?" He said, "It's like, dude, what are you doing? You don't attack the base. You can't attack the base. That's not acceptable."
Yeah, and that's also just a massive straw man and a stupid fucking point. It's like, all we wanted were the fucking laws that exist to be upheld. That's it. So they commit fraud. If you have somebody on Wall Street who commits fraud, you got to treat that guy the same way that if there was a small businessman who was caught doing fraud in a small town, and that person would go to fucking jail. Right. But the people on Wall Street got away with it because of their massive campaign contributions. And Bill Clinton is a fucking product of that system, so he doesn't see any evil.
Right. And yeah, it's frustrating, but thankfully there are people like you, people like Young Turks and whatnot, who, when you listen to them, it's like therapeutic. Like it's kind of like venting. When I come on the air, I vent for my viewers because I kind of feel like there's so much stupidity that if you don't take a step back and reflect on it, it's going to drive you crazy. And I kind of felt like I lost a little bit of my sanity during this election. I don't know if that's the same for you too.
No, it's I certainly learned that I dislike many more people than I thought I did. That I learned, but yeah, I think you're nailing it about what it is we do. So when I go on air and I'm talking about stuff, I guess in a weird way that's a form of therapy because it's me giving information about something that I think is fucked up and then explaining just why it's fucked up and how it's so fucked up and explaining that we should change it. And I guess it gives you a little bit of a release, and it makes it so that, people, what's that word I'm looking for? Is it catharsis? Is that the right word? People watch it and they feel catharsis?
I don't know.
Don't make me look it up right now.
We'll go with that.
We'll go with catharsis, but that might not be. It was either.
I'll be wrong,
It's not
too.
It's not Schadenfreude. That's another one that is a word that's slightly
yeah,
above my
yeah.
pay grade. I think that's like getting pleasure out of somebody else's pain, Schadenfreude. But catharsis, I think, is what people feel when they watch us. If it's the word I'm thinking of.
I'm fucking embarrassing myself because I'm a PhD student. I don't know. I
Yeah,
can't
no,
think of it.
okay, but let me just say real quick, just some inside stuff so people know what goes on here. Like, there are times when I'm doing the show and a word will just come out, and I'm like, there's a 50% chance that word makes no sense where I just put it. Like, because sometimes, it's a word that's deep in the memory bank, and like you've used it before a few times, but you're not sure if you're using it in the exact right context, but you're already too committed, and it just comes out. And then you just got to run with it and say, you know what? Even if this shit is wrong, I'm going to say it so that you think it's right.
Right. You just own it. You make word salad sometimes, but you know what?
Yeah.
I think the viewers know what we mean. They can fill in the blanks.
Yeah, and then also another thing that happens, I'm sure you've experienced this too when you do live shows, is it's a guarantee that every now and then you'll just lose a thought mid-sentence.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, that happened to me like twice in this talk. So
Me
it
too.
happens, man. It just happens. It's par for the course when you talk about stuff like this.
And that's what makes us natural, right? Because we're not reading from any teleprompters or like the news people who are just so rehearsed and robotic. We're just saying what's on our minds. It's unadulterated.
It's the
not
beauty
fake.
of media. So
Right.
I guess a good way to put it is some of the failures of new media even have beauty in it. Like, because at least you're getting something that's fucking genuine and sincere and real. Whereas if you're watching Wolf Blitzer read off a prompter, God, man, I always fucking go after Wolf Blitzer, but I think he deserves it.
He's an easy target.
No, I really dislike him. Like, this is the part where I'm supposed to say, "Oh, it's not personal." No, it is personal. Fuck you, Wolf Blitzer. Because you know what? This guy, I mean, he's been on TV since 1806, and he's still not famous. Like, he's been on TV every day for that long, still not famous. And his whole, he's in the position he's in because he doesn't challenge authority. He's in that position because he's a stenographer to the establishment and to people in power. And it's not like he personally is a bad guy, but you're just a fucking tool and you don't know it. Like, I think he doesn't realize how much responsibility he actually has in doing what he does. I mean, he's on CNN more than anybody. He has more hours than anybody. And there's never an interesting thought, never, even when they discuss facts and things that are actually happening, it's never the things that he should be covering. I mean, let's go find out. How many times has Wolf Blitzer covered the fucking, devastation from the airstrikes in Yemen from Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is bombing the shit out of Yemen with weapons we gave them, and sometimes we point out the coordinates on the fucking map. And they're killing civilians on purpose. By some counts, 50% of the people that they killed are civilians. It's women, it's children. They've bombed, fucking mosques and open-air markets and schools and hospitals. How many times has Wolf Blitzer discussed that? None, because he's a fucking little useful idiot for the establishment.
He doesn't even know what's going on, I'm sure. I mean, he doesn't have to do research. He just reads everything from a script.
Yeah, he's
it's
fucking
so
Ron
frustrating.
Burgundy. He's Ron Burgundy. Burgundy will read anything off the prompter. And, he just happens to, at least Ron Burgundy is somewhat entertaining. Wolf is just fucking boring as shit, and he's reading off the prompter, and it's never anything worth discussing. But you know what? I'm bitching. I shouldn't be bitching, because that's why new media is blowing up.
That's true.
That's why people like listening to shows like ours, and, so Wolf keeps sucking. I appreciate it.
And my Wolf Blitzer is Chris Matthews. He says things with so much hubris that are wrong that it just makes my head explode. And he also has a punch face on top of that. I can say that because I have a punch face, I think, to a degree. But he just has this unlikable personality, and he thinks he knows everything, but he doesn't. And I hate that. But I'm glad that they do fuck up, like you said, because they do give us things to talk about and make fun of. And we can point out why they're wrong.
Talk about a fall from grace. I mean, how about Maddow, who at one time was like seemingly a very real liberal who actually cared about shit. And then now, I mean, with the fucking blame Jill Stein for everything ever, and just some of the interviews she did of Hillary Clinton were just disgusting. It was in the middle of the primary when she should have been holding her accountable and saying, hey, let's compare and contrast you and Bernie. It was just fluff pieces and softballs to destroy Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, just pure propaganda.
Yeah, and even the better host, like there was a time when some of the better hosts on MSNBC, I would have said, were just good. But now even the better hosts are, now. Like even Chris Hayes, who overall I think is a decent guy. He's ran with some shit that I'm like, really? Is that this road you're going down with the whole Russia thing and playing Donald Trump as a fucking puppet of Vladimir Putin? What? That's another thing. I mean, we don't need to get too into it, but I've been driven crazy. Like I follow a bunch of people on Twitter who are in the political world. Some of them, some writers for Think Progress, for example, who at times did decent work. But there's this guy Judd Legum who, he is just the quintessential hack partisan pundit who never has anything good to say, never has anything informative to say. So he was going after Trump the other day, like right when the deal was announced that Carrier got to is keeping some jobs here, and we didn't even know any of the details yet. All we knew was, and Carrier had confirmed it, yeah, we're going to keep some jobs here. He started attacking Trump over that. Like, wait, what? Like, no, I thought you're supposed to be a liberal and you're supposed to care about people, and you're supposed to go, hey, you know what? Like, let's be reasonable, and for example, let's say if Donald Trump happens to, I don't know, protect Social Security or do a good infrastructure bill, if that were to happen, you're supposed to be an objective person and go, okay, well, it appears like the details of this are good. Credit where credit is due. But these people don't do that. These people,
he's just never, a hack.
They never use. There's so many good arguments to use against Trump, and they're too stupid to figure out what the good arguments are. So they just use shitty arguments, and they attack him for shit he does that actually might be good. And the Carrier thing, again, to be clear, it's a much more mixed picture.
You're right. It is.
Corporate welfare and deregulation is part of it, and he should have stuck to what he said in the campaign trail, which is, if you go, I'm going to fucking put a tariff on you and make it cost more. You're going to stay, and you're going to pay your taxes, and I'm not going to deregulate you. That's how he needed to do it. That's how he said he was going to do it. Now there's more corporate giveaways as part of it and deregulation, so it's not as good as it's supposed to be. Right. I get it. But still, you got to say, okay, he said he was going to keep the jobs here. He's keeping at least 800 of them here. Let me not be a douche and say, well, at least on that, you know what, thumbs up.
And Judd Legum, he has no credibility. He was implicated in John Podesta's emails for colluding with Hillary Clinton. I don't know what he did. He might have given like an article. I covered it, but it's been a little bit now. So, I mean, you have no credibility. The people who you were supposed to be a check on, you were trying to do propaganda for them. So, I mean, it's just one of the many examples of how media and just the political establishment failed us during this election. And
he's also going on and on about Trump's business ties and conflicts of interest, which, by the way, on those points he makes, he's correct about them. But what frustrates me is he never said anything about the same conflicts of interest that Hillary Clinton had with the fucking Clinton Foundation.
Yep.
We're taking money from Qatar and Saudi Arabia and fucking approving weapons deals and child soldiers in South Sudan and getting them a waiver for having child soldiers. And so you didn't have dick to say about it when it was your preferred candidate. But now that it's Trump's in office, it's like, okay, well, now I'm just going to focus on his conflicts of interest and corruption. Like, oh, so all of a sudden you're concerned about conflicts of interest and corruption. Look,
right.
Again, I want to be clear. I'm happy when people attack Trump. I attack Trump on a daily basis. But you have to fucking use arguments that are reasonable. You can't. I don't want the left to totally become like the right. Just hacky, fucking shitty arguments that are just trying to push the narrative. Us right, them wrong. And you don't care about consistency. You don't care about hypocrisy. You don't care about any of that stuff. Because that's not the kind of left that I want to be a part of. And
right.
Again, so you alluded to it earlier. We've been working on something behind the scenes, and I'll be announcing it soon. But there is going to be a push to take back the Democratic Party and make them what they should have been all along.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's good. Well, I'll definitely be on board for that as well, because I think that, if we don't take control, then they're just going to run it into the ground and the country's going to get worse and worse. And like you said, I think there's going to be a lot of bad things that will happen that could have been prevented, like an economic crash and whatnot. So
yeah, and you can get 2 terms of president grab him by the pussy, I don't even wait. to terms of Mr. I had an unpopularity rating of 63% during the general election and won. The fact that the Democrats can't beat that guy shows that the Democrats are fucking broken. And
yeah, it's embarrassing.
it's not even a good counter argument in this point. If somebody says, "Okay, well, she won the popular vote," yeah, but you could have made it, or it should be the case that you could have spotted him 5 million votes to start, and you still win. You see what I'm saying? Like, okay, yeah, you won by 2-point-something million popular votes. You should have won by like 15 million. It should have been a historic landslide. It should have been over 500 electoral votes.
Yeah, she was playing on the easiest difficulty if this election were a video game. You fucked up something that should have been a cakewalk. And when they brag about the popular vote, I'm sitting here just like going crazy because what they forget to tell you is that one poll from Reuters and Ipsos anyways, it found out that more people were voting for Hillary Clinton to defeat Donald Trump than they were just voting for her because they liked her. So I don't think that's anything to brag about. Not being Trump and bragging about it that's not something that you want to boast about. You should be embarrassed about it.
Yeah. All right, man. It was a great conversation. I got to run now.
All right. Well, thanks, man. Anything you want to plug or anything you want to shout out to, your Twitter or whatnot? No.
I just I know you're going to upload this on your channel. I'm going to upload it on mine, too. So I'll just tell everybody real quick. If you haven't yet, guys, check out Humanist Report. And, he's been called, I believe, gay me. That's what people have said. You're the gay version of Kyle.
Right.
So there you go. You get a double dose if you check out his show.
All right. Well, hey, it's been really fun. To all of my subscribers who are watching, please check out Kyle. I'm sure you already know about him because he's blowing up. He's the Michael Jordan of the progressive movement on the internet.
Please, yes. I'm Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and name any other fucking dominant. No, I'm kidding. Of course I'm not. But thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. Yes, I'm the Jesus. I'm the God of the left. No, I'm not. But thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem, man. Well, thank you so much. It's been great. Really appreciate it. Had a great time.
All right, later, brother.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.